Thank you very much indeed, Aris. I'm going to begin with a question which I'd like to ask Suzanne, because I'm sure you are all sick of my voice by now.
Not at all.
Suzanne, I thought it'd be really interesting because I know, you, like me, teach regularly. Can you tell us about your last speaking class?
I can, yes. It was actually yesterday. Yesterday was my last speaking class, and with one of my lovely, lovely, lovely students from Argentina. And she actually had just returned from Argentina she'd been there for 3 weeks, and so this is her first lesson back. And she very quickly said to me, she said, "Oh, Susanna, I can't speak anymore. I can't speak." Her confidence level had gone down somewhat, and but within, I would say, I don't know, maybe 5, 10 minutes, all the cobwebs had come off, and we were ready to go. So it was actually a very good, very high energy lesson. She's, I would say, level C1,
Okay.
and she's a very switched on young lady. She really is. So it's a one-to-one class, and we started off with, tell me about your holiday. You were in Argentina, and one of the first things that was quite interesting, actually, she said, was that she had a lot of salad when she was there in Argentina. And I thought, oh, nice. And I said, for example, because I was wondering maybe some sort of kind of fruit vegetable that maybe we don't have here in the UK. And she said pizza. And I thought, oh. So we had a conversation. I didn't want to jump in straight away, but I made a note of it. And then we came back and we had a discussion about it. And I said, I think what we mean to say here is savoury. And we continued having a discussion around what the word savoury is in Spanish and how she ended up with salad. And so that was how we started off our speaking lesson yesterday. So
I'm
what
really, I'm
mm,
really interested, sorry for interrupting, and
no.
picking up on what was happening there in terms of your decision to delay diving in.
Mhm.
And also, by the sounds of it, you were happy to consider that her use of the word salad was a correct one, and that you wanted to explore this not through a incorrect, correct form focus.
Mm.
You're actually wanting to interact with her in a meaningful, communicative way, in the same way as someone who isn't a language teacher might say, "Oh, interested what you said about salad. Tell me more."
Yeah.
Rather than salad is the wrong word. You should be. Was that a deliberate strategy? I mean, what can we learn from those skills and those strategies that you used with that learner?
Well, I think in that particular situation, I know her. I've worked with her for maybe 2 years or probably more. Her language level is pretty good, pretty high. And when she said that she had salad, my interest was piqued because she said she was at a birthday party and she had salad.
Uh,
I thought, oh, well, okay, why not? Why not? Let's,
yeah,
healthy living. Yeah, absolutely. So just me that thinks about pizza at birthday parties. And so I let her explain, and that's why I prompted for more information. And I said, what did you have? My first thought though was, I was hoping for something like dragon fruit or, something really exciting that was in this salad. Anyway, when I realized that, well, when I thought I realized what the situation
yeah,
was, I saw that you said in the chat that you and I both taught in Italy, and my Italian kicked in.
yeah,
I thought, aha, maybe we don't mean salad, maybe we mean salty, savory
yeah,
food.
yeah, yeah,
Let's just see how we go with this. And then my main sort of thought process was, she's just come back from her holiday. She is lacking a little bit of confidence. We're
yes,
talking sub skills here. We've got fluency, we've got accuracy, and we are having a meaningful conversation.
yeah,
She could be meaning one thing. I might be thinking she's meaning something else now.
yeah,
Let me check, but let her tell me, because she's at that level. She can do that. And
Yeah.
also, I want to build her confidence up. I don't want to say, no, that's not
Yeah.
correct.
Right.
I want her to get that confidence that I know she has, that she
Yeah.
just has to dust off a little bit
Yeah.
because she's been in Argentina for 3 weeks.
It leads us quite nicely into the second question. And Alona, thank you for posting this one that's come up in Q&A. And Alona has asked, what prevails in assessing students' answer, form or meaning? Perhaps we could look at this in one of two ways. Thinking about assessment in more general terms, as in a way of evaluating learners' language, not in a formal test, but much as you were evaluating that learner and thinking, am I going to work with the word salad or not? So perhaps we could look at it in that way. We could also look at it in terms of what happens in actual formal speaking tests. So I don't know whether you'd like to start with one or the other, the assessment for learning general or the test focus. What do you think?
I think general.
Okay. In that case, I'll have a
Um,
go at talking about tests.
okay.
What do you
Uh,
think?
sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So what do you think about what should prevail when we're working with students in a general context?
Well, I think, Neil, in a general context, I am all for using the language as a communication tool. And appreciating that, all of us, not all of us, a lot of us have, a sentence structure in our head. We know what we want to say. Then the moment the real time comes and you trip over it and you go, ah. So I think that when we're looking at assessing how are our students speaking and how are they communicating, I think what we have to do is we have to look at the ideas that they're communicating, the context. Are we going the right way? Are we talking about a, let's look at the salad situation. I was going down that road. I was like, okay, well, in Argentina you have salad parties, cool. Um, not realizing that I was being led down a different path. So I think that we have to look at the communication,
Mm.
and see what the message actually is. What are your thoughts?
I'm just looking down at my phone because I saw a really interesting post on a Delta trainer a Facebook page earlier, which I think is quite interesting in terms of answering this question. I mean, I agree with you entirely. I get quite frustrated, but I understand why it happens when we see teachers focusing in immediately on form. And my view is that I'll give you an example. It wasn't when I was teaching English, but it was actually when I was teaching Italian. And I had a whole group of complete beginners, and they were doing a degree in tourism. They weren't linguists. And I had one particular learner who decided that she could not get her head around Italian verbs, and she wasn't even going to bother. So at the end of year test, everything she said was used with a time frame and then an infinitive. So it was something like yesterday, I to go cinema. Tomorrow, I to go beach. Next year, we to go year abroad. And she communicated brilliantly. And if we start thinking about, strategic competence, I would far rather a learner who is enthusiastic, riddled with grammatical error, but who is communicatively successful, than the learner who spends an awful lot of time sitting in front of a grammar book, learning it, and then you use the term real time, actually can't get it out. Because
Mm,
that in sort of, that ability to externalize, verbalize the language. I mean, surely that's why we use a language. Don't we use languages to learn, and don't we learn by communication?
mm.
So I'd far rather have a flawed grammatical um, performance, which is meaning rich.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I think
But
that is it's absolutely my point of view.
yeah,
However, I think we also have to understand that we have students in all sessions who take um who take their learning down the road of learning grammar tables and, learning, verb tables and all that sort of thing. And that's where they start. Now, the problem that we have there is, what are you learning the language for? Now, I think you and I probably are quite similar. We use it to talk to people and to, chat about whatever it is, chat about what we're having at our party.
What's your favorite 1980s power ballad,
Oh,
Suzanne?
I've got a lot to say about that. A lot to say about that, but I'll leave my Bonnie Tyler moment till later. But as you can see, I've got the hair for it, so that's good. But yeah, I think that we have to understand that each of our learners have got a different need
Yeah,
for English. And so while I 100% agree with you, I think it is something that we as teachers, and especially teachers like you and me, we have to understand that not everybody's using it to be, flamboyant and meet people and say, hello, it's lovely
yeah.
to see you. And,
Alone kindly clarified in chat that for her, she's thinking about the general context, not the exam context. But we also probably have to consider that many students, whether they like it or not, at some point will have to go through a test, which may well have a speaking component that not only that really does look at their grammatical accuracy and range, the vocabulary accuracy and range. So in answer to, I think, Alona's point, I think we agree about this. I like her use of the word prevail. I think we would agree that meaning prevails, but not at the expense of looking at form as well, but perhaps do it meaning first, form second. You communicated that idea really brilliantly. Well done. Let's look at some of the language that you use to do it and see if we can help improve, develop, correct that.
yeah.
Which probably leads us quite nicely into something I know that you were quite keen to think about, which is emergent language. So for people who are perhaps less familiar with the term emergent language, this is that situation where you set up in the class an activity where the students are aiming to communicate an opinion, an idea, a feeling, a response to something. So they may look at a picture and they may be wanting to actually say, what do you think is happening here? And they're actually trying to muster all of the language that's available to them to bring out an idea. And some of that language might be full of mistakes. It's emergent language. It shows us where they're at in their language journey. And that might be they're really advanced, but they still lack very specific vocabulary. So the classic example, I went out into the street and I talked to lots of people and I asked them some survey questions about their views on XYZ lemonade, meaning I did some market research.
Mm.
What are your views about the value and perhaps also the challenge of working with emergent language when we're developing the speaking skill?
Honestly speaking, Neil, I get
Absolutely.
goosebumps. I
Ah,
think
great.
wonderful. I think it's wonderful. And I understand that some teachers don't agree with that. But
Mm.
I think that knowing, as myself as a language learner, I know that when it happens to me, it's because I'm thinking and I am enthusiastic and I'm excited about, the language and the communication and talking. And I think that when it happens in my class, quite often, a word pops out and it could even be correct, and it's like, oh,
How did
where did
I
that
know
come?
that?
How do I know that? And I remember when I first moved over to Italy, a lot of my students popped out with, "Cool, that's great." It's like, where'd you get that from? Anyway, um,
Ah,
but I think, honestly, I think it's something to be embraced. I think, though, it can easily derail a class. If
right.
you have, somebody who is, speaking about something that they heard online last night, and it's completely off topic or off level, and it's going to create a difficulty to discuss it and use it and have it around. Then it's something that we can definitely park. We say, do you know what? That's wonderful. We will come back to that, but now is not the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but I love it. I think it's great. I think it is. It shows you've got well, well forward thinking. I think that's what it is. Forward thinking students who are involved. And can you ask for students that are better than those that are involved and motivated like that?
So I guess in terms of setting up for success, we've talked quite a lot. We've heard quite a lot in the video about, what we can do as teachers in the planning stage, but it's also about creating an environment in which students are comfortable to take risks. And for us to help them to know it's okay to take risks, to praise them when they've done so, even if it was unsuccessful, and also to help them on to kind of like mini steps towards success, which, and Gabby's completely and utterly read our minds, I think, here, because we had a really interesting comment from Christina in Italy, who was asking about helping her students between an A2 up to a B2 level, 14 to 18, that they sometimes find the teachers can find it difficult to get the students going. So, Christine, I don't know if you'd like, and Aris, if you can help here. Christine, if you could perhaps just briefly tell us a bit more about your context and the challenges that you have. And then Suzanne and I'll have a go at trying to help you if we possibly can. Hi, Christina.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you well, thank you, Christina.
Okay, you can't see me. Yeah, just like I was saying, I was writing in the chat box. The main problem in our lessons is that we usually put in quite a lot of new vocabulary and new grammar structures and functions, language functions and so on. But when it comes to speaking, the students seem to run out of, well, I wouldn't say ideas, because they are very creative, so they have lots of ideas, but they run out of vocabulary and structures, so their conversation stops after just a little while.
Okay.
And it happened this morning in one of my classes, in a second class. So they are about 15. So
Okay.
their level is a B1 level, more or less. And we were, talking about, well, they were talking about plastic pollution and the environment and so
Okay.
on.
And their level
And
was?
between A2 and B1. Some are
Okay.
very good,
Right.
so their
Okay.
level is B1.
Okay.
Others just have an A2 level.
Okay.
And I grouped them.
I think what we want to avoid is a situation, Christina, that is so
Yeah.
specific that it's more difficult to replicate it for the other teachers joining us. But I think you've given us a very good starting point, which will be
Thank
very
you.
familiar for everyone, which is, the students have been fed lots of language, but you're not just getting it back out again. Suzanne, can you and I just maybe demo something now?
Sure.
So
Talk me through it.
the context is plastics and pollution.
Okay.
So, Suzanne, I'd like you to give me 3 words that you remember from our vocabulary session when we were talking about plastics and the environment. Just 3 words, please, Suzanne.
Ocean, turtle, and green.
Okay, thank you. Suzanne, can you give me a sentence, anything with the word ocean in it?
I have seen the Pacific Ocean.
Thank you. Can you tell me, did you like the Pacific Ocean?
Yes, I did.
Why?
It was enormous.
Can you now tell me 2 sentences? You see ocean, enormous. Tell me again.
I saw an enormous ocean.
Okay, or you could just say, I have seen the Pacific Ocean. It was enormous. Okay. Tell me something about the Pacific Ocean and pollution, please.
The Pacific Ocean is polluted in parts, but generally it's not polluted.
Fantastic sentence, Suzanne. Thank you. Can you now put your 3 sentences together?
I have seen the Pacific Ocean. It was enormous. Or it is enormous. The Pacific Ocean is polluted in parts, but not generally.
So I think what's happening here, Christina, is you're starting with a comfort zone for the students. They're starting with language that they volunteer and they probably therefore know. You're minimizing the need for fluency initially by you're just asking them to say something very short, but you're building on it step by step. And you can carry on doing this for 4 or 5 points. Each time the student has to say the first, second, the second one, the third one, the fourth one, the fifth one. Gabby, you've very cleverly anticipated my point about how would this work with a group of 15 students. If you've got a group of enthusiastic learners, you demo this with one, probably not the best student in the class, maybe not the weakest, someone in the middle. You then put the students into groups of 3 or 4. So Christina, you've got groups of 25 students, 5 groups of 4, 4 groups of 5, and then the students take it in turns. One student takes the role of the teacher, asking the question. One student takes the role answering the questions. The other 3 become the monitors. They provide peer feedback. Now, you might have to teach them how to give peer feedback. You agree your success criteria. Did you understand what the person said? Did they say it in English? Did they speak for more than 5-10 seconds for each sentence? And you build it up that way. So yes, I believe it can work with a large group if you have biddable students, who are willing to kind of go along with the sentence build thing. If, on the other hand, you've got students who are more reluctant, this is where I think you can probably bring in online technologies that we all found during lockdown. You model this with a friend, a colleague, you put it up onto a Padlet or onto Flip, and the students watch it, and then they get into little groups and they do this through WhatsApp and they record themselves building, or actually the students can just do it on their own. So I think what we're trying to do here is reduce the load on the students, ask them to do something simple that they can build on. I also wondered whether, when you said that you're giving your students a lot of language, I wonder whether you're giving them maybe too much. Now, we know with new vocabulary that it takes 8 or 9 attempts to learn, forget, learn, forget, learn, forget. If you're giving them 20 or 30 words in a lesson, quite frankly, their heads will be shot. Maybe less is more. That's one idea, Suzanne. Have you got any others that you can suggest to help Christina and the other people on the call who have similar challenges?
I think, yeah, I totally agree with you, Neil. Less is more, and I go with that a lot. I pick up a theme like you just did with me, and I have an input of maybe 3 or 4 either words or concepts, or depending on what it is, depending on what we're talking about, and we just recycle it. I think recycling is a really important tool when it comes down to that, because just because the lesson is finished now, that's not it. That's not the end of learning about the Pacific Ocean. So in a couple of weeks' time, you come back to it, you recycle it, you think about it again, and you ask again, and then and having taught lots of different well, age groups of students and lots of different levels of students and all that sort of things. I've been teaching for 23 years. We whisper it now, 23 years. It's never, I don't think it's ever a situation you can say, oh, this will work. This is definitely going to work. This is how, this student will learn and understand, because we're all individuals, we're all different. And I think that's another thing to take into consideration, that the people in our groups, in our classes are different. And especially, I hate to say it, Neil, but like you and me, we've been teaching a long time now. We can't go back to the time when we first started teaching and think it's just the same as it was. I mean, can you imagine? So you have to be, you have to grow, you have to develop, you have to evolve. And we have to see that in our students as well, because they will.
Absolutely. Gabby's asked the point about, that thing that you and I just demoed. Thank you for going with it, because I know we hadn't planned that at all.
No, and I know nothing about the Pacific Ocean, although I have seen it. I went to Japan, so.
And she's asking, would an activity like that work with B2 learners? Well, if the B2 learners aren't actually verbalizing, even though they've got a lot of language in their head, that isn't coming out. I think we have to start somewhere. So, I mean, as you say, it's all about knowing our learners. It's all about knowing what makes that one tick and that one tick differently. So, I mean, I think the first thing to say is that you can have a B2 learner who actually, when they open their mouth, very little comes out. So with that kind of learner, I think it would work. If you've got B2 learners who are more confident, but who are making lots of slips, then you might want to have an activity to enable them to understand what is a mistake, what is a slip, mistakes and slips, how are they different from errors, what are the implications for slips and errors. So, for example, we know third person S is late acquired. Students at a B2 level might well still be saying, she liked going to the cinema. And that's because of interlanguage. It's not because they're a lazy, bad student. It's just not coming out spontaneously all the time correctly. But there's no point reteaching them the past simple. They know it. So it's maybe about raising awareness and for the student being able to self-monitor. We've had a question from Mian right from the start, and I'd hate us not to get onto that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Do you want me to read it out?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so you talked about a class of very small numbers, or is it a larger class with a duration of 40 minutes or 1 hour? What is your say on subject-specific classes?
Yeah, and I wasn't quite sure what Mian meant about subject specific, but unfortunately,
maybe like, as you said to me earlier on about pollution, could be that.
Yes, I wonder if it's CLIL or wonder if it's thematic. Small class or large class is does that make a difference? What do you think?
To me, well, personally, I mean, it does a little bit in time for me. That's all. What do you think?
I think if you've got one student, you're disadvantaged because it's difficult to get, unless you've got a very engaged learner, it can be a bit of hard work. I actually think it's easier to teach 30 students than it is 3. You just got to get your groupings right. And you've got to be thinking about how you're going to go about monitoring. But I think the energy will actually enable the speaking class. Lessons of 40 minutes or an hour. How do you, what do you do with a lesson of an hour and it's called speaking?
I think, again, that's the thing, isn't it? I'm a bit old school. I think now most teachers plan for 50 minutes and then have a feedback at the session. I plan for an hour and have a feedback for 10 minutes at the end of that as well. If I am doing a class on speaking, it would be for an hour. And I would get the ball rolling with something that you've just, like an experiment, if you like, that you've just demonstrated, something along those lines, just to get people started. And then, one thing leads to the other, conversations are had, questions are open, That's that. Yeah, I go with the snowball effect. What about you?
I think if I've got an hour-long speaking lesson, I'm going to actually, my first question is, what's right for my learners? So if they're a class that can keep going and be on track, then I'd be delighted for a DogMe lesson where there is the content, the topic area just comes from them and it's self-sustaining. What I might do is actually think, well, I'll break it down into 20 minutes and go for a natural break, do a bit of feedback, see what works, go for another 20 minutes and do it that way. I think what I'd also do is, for some of the time at least, because I think with DogMe, which is another term for teaching unplugged, it's a bit like the MTV, where it's just the musician with their instrument, their voice, and no extra electronica. It's going back to the basics. I think that can be quite scary for some teachers. So I think for some teachers, they might want something to hang on to. So I think with speaking, we've seen previously the value of a well-rounded speaker is someone who can understand turn taking, who can understand how to interrupt, how to take the floor, how to listen, how to show they're listening actively, how not to interrupt and break the flow. So I might try and identify one or two sub-skills. I tell the students at the beginning of the lesson what we're aiming for, let them speak, maybe record them so they can listen back and watch, or video and watch back, and then with them actually look at times where something went really well and times where it didn't go quite so well and try and empower them. You remember that time when Michiko wanted to interject but didn't know how? What phrases have you heard other students today using to interrupt? Or it might be, oh, body language. They look, they raise their hand, they go, and then try it, and then go back to the activity. I think it's really important that there is a learning outcome, and that aligned to that learning outcome, if it's a speaking skills lesson, that there is a sub-skill which has, either through teacher input or through observing one another, an incremental improvement during the course of the 40 or 50 minutes. Some students, of course, need much more structure, and that's where course books and speaking resource books become really useful. I think we're very rapidly getting towards 5:30. And the only thing we haven't even looked at all is AI. And perhaps that's such a big topic, we might want to leave that for another time.
Yes, maybe we should.
What, Suzanne, would be your closing nugget as a teacher and a trainer of so much experience to hand over to our participants at the end of today?
My nugget is protect the fluency. Don't interrupt. Let them speak and see if they self-correct. If they don't, then we can rewind and we can recycle, but protect the fluency and build the confidence.
Love it.
What's yours?
Have a notepad and divide the notepad into two columns, one for the really good stuff and one for the stuff to be repaired. Start the feedback with the really good stuff. Get the students noticing each other's really good language. Then work with the repair, but praise good effort even when the language was not that great. And then perhaps at the end have some kind of overall comment that looks at, well, okay, you did really, really well today. It was a hard topic. You brought in loads of great vocabulary. Oh, we've seen these areas to improve, but you all communicated successfully, so well done. So the kind of the good news sandwich. But have that notepad to note down the language so it's not lost and it doesn't become ephemera.